We've been working on building our D&D toolkit here, and in this podcast, we're going to explore the idea utilizing miniatures in your D&D game. As a DM, physically building up the toolkit. So this way, when you run your adventure, you have many, many choices. You could go really old school, just pen and paper, graph paper, map it out, everything in your mind. You could go about midway, and I think a lot of D&D games are like this, where you have a dry erase mat, or you have the tiles, the dungeon tiles, you put out the figures of the monsters, of the players. This adds a really nice visual to encounters, and it also helps calculate, honestly, it helps calculate the distance, who's in range, area of effect. There are no surprises because literally it's tactical. And then on the very far end, you could even go really extreme and have the Dwarven Forge or 3D dungeon furniture, effects, one-to-one, fully painted monsters, and essentially create an entire world. So let's look at some advantages, disadvantages, building your miniature collection and utilizing it. Miniatures have the potential to slow down the game if you're not organized. And what I mean by that is when the party has an encounter, if you now have to go through your kit, pull out the miniatures, set them up, draw the map, put the tiles down, that has the capacity to really, really slow things down. If you have a little bit of organization, and this is important, what I like to do if I'm using a DM screen, then next to that screen behind it, I'll put together the monsters that we're going to utilize for the adventure. When I have the maps, if I'm utilizing tiles, I'll put the tiles in groups of 4. So this way, when it's like you kick down the door, you roll for initiative, I can take those tiles, lay them out very quickly, put the monsters down. If you have just a little bit of organization in that respect, it works really, really well. And setup time is almost nothing. On a side note, making little markers that could be the size of a penny or just a numbered marker. I find it helps to keep track of initiative this way, to literally put the marker next to the monster, next to the character, next to the figure, and work out initiative that everyone can see, as opposed to maybe writing it down or having an initiative board. Not that you can't utilize that. Building the collection. I'm a wargamer. Also, I enjoy tabletop war games like Warhammer 40,000, X-Wing Miniatures, BattleTech. That's an entirely other universe. But I say this because miniature collection is extremely addictive. You have to be careful. You're going to start out simple. You're going to collect. You're going to come across a couple of good deals. You're going to get excited by an adventure module. And next thing you know, you've got this massive amount of miniatures on there. And absolutely, that's an amazing part of playing and utilizing miniatures. But we want to come up with an attack plan. So this way, the resources that we have that are realistic, whether they're trade resources or financial resources, we can utilize them. I would recommend starting out with level 1 to 3 encounters. You're always going to use some orcs, some goblins, some zombies, some skeletons, generic kind of wolves, generic kind of rat swarms, giant spiders, just kind of the classic early D&D stuff. Those miniatures are going to be your workhorse in that if you start a new campaign and you have players at level 1, level 2, that's what they're going to fight. But even at the higher levels, when your PCs get to levels 8 and 10, and now there's some boss monsters, some lieutenants, some powerful monsters, they're also going to be using minions. They're going to be throwing waves and waves of orcs and goblins. So you're always going to get that level of use out of the miniatures. That's where I'd go first. Second, then, I would build out classic D&D iconic monsters. A dragon or 2. We're looking at a beholder, a mummy, a vampire lord. Things that are defined in the D&D universe that would make a great end cap, a great end game for the party to face. You're going to utilize those at some point. We build that up. And then from there, really, I would focus on what you feel like collecting as a DM, what you want to throw against the party, and then maybe looking at some of the more obscure D&D monsters that are certainly very powerful and challenging and great, but they don't happen as much. I'd tackle those last. A great example would be like a Bodak. When's the last time you fought one? But if you look in the monster manual, it is very, very potent. So utilizing miniatures, yes or no in your game. I have a number of D&D miniatures. I have a number of fantasy type miniatures. I do tend to utilize them in most of my games. When I do, it involves kind of a pre-printed map or the tiles, and I lay out the miniatures, and all the players have a figure for their own character. On a side note, I also have about 15 generic kind of NPC adventurer that I utilize not only for NPCs, but also if someone new to D&D comes and they don't have their own figure yet. A lot of players do have a figure that represents one-to-one their character. I have a few that can be borrowed. The entire collection is quite large, but I pull out what I'm going to use for the adventure. I put it in literally a shoebox, transport it with me to the gaming site, the gaming table, set it up. It does add a new and very, very interesting 3D level to D&D, but in no way is it mandatory or necessary.